Hello and greetings from Great Barrington, Massachusetts. I'm Karen Christensen, talking to colleagues around the world about topics that I write about at Karen's Letter. We often talk about books. Sustainability is always a focus. I latched onto this saying, think globally, act locally, when I was very young, and it sums up what you'll find at this podcast about the way we live now. Good morning, I'm Karen Christensen, and I have the pleasure and honor of talking to Kathy Giuffre, who is in Italy. And she tells me that it's very hot there, but she said it's also Italy. And so one thing very much makes up for the other. Kathy and I had a conversation last week about third places, and I found it so interesting. I wanted to give you, my audience, a chance to hear what she has learned both from being a professor in the United States who focused on creative social networks, and then what she's learned from living now in an Italian village. So good morning, Kathy.
Good morning. It's lovely to talk to you again.
Again, yes. I wish we were face to face in Italy. I mean, the British is nice, but it's not Italy. Tell us about your journey and your reflections on you have a place in the village you call a pub, which by itself is really interesting to me that you use that term.
Yeah, so my husband and I both retired 2 years ago from being professors in the United States, and the kids are all out of the house, and we just thought, what do we want to do? And so we sold our house and we packed 2 suitcases and we took off, and we thought we'll go someplace, we'll stay a few different places for a few different months at a time. And at some point we'll find a place where we want to settle down. And we came to Italy first because my husband does have Italian citizenship, so that made it somewhat easier, especially because COVID was still sort of hanging around and we worried about travel restrictions and things. So we came to Italy, and that was now 2 years ago. And we haven't left. We haven't left. We keep saying, oh, we just haven't left. And so now we're talking about being here permanently. We live in a very tiny village, population 255 people in Tuscany on the coast overlooking the sea. And at first we had some worries that as foreigner, my husband has Italian citizenship, but he is an American and grew up in New Jersey. I'm an American, grew up in Arkansas. And so we're very much Americans and foreigners, and we speak some Italian, but not perfect Italian. And we were worried that in a village this small, that we would not really be accepted by the local populace. And in this village, there are only 2 public places, the church and the pub. We call it the pub because there isn't a word for exactly what it is in English. There just isn't a word. And you could say bar, it's not really a bar. You could say restaurant, it's not really a restaurant. You could say social club, it's not. The thing that it is a public house. And I found it so interesting listening to some of your previous podcasts, especially of people in England talking about the pub, the public house. And people here who work at what we call the pub have said to us on a couple of different occasions, oh, consider this your house. You're welcome here. It's a big living room and everybody can just come in. And, our internet was out a couple of weeks ago and we had stuff we needed to do. Come use our internet, sit around. Yes, you can have a meeting here. Yes, you can do whatever you want to do here. No worries. This is a public house. Come and make yourself at home. And so that I think is something that we did not experience in the United States. We did not. We had places we could go and places we were regulars, but we didn't have another home outside of our home that way.
And where were you living in the United States?
I lived in Colorado Springs, Colorado, which is a city of, I think now it's almost 500,000 people. And it's at the base of Pikes Peak. There's incredible natural beauty. And so it's a good place to live. But it's it's not a hillside in Tuscany.
Yeah. So you arrived there And how did you choose that village? I think you'd been there before, is that right?
When I was an undergraduate, exactly 1,000,000 years ago, I took a year off between my sophomore and junior years, and I randomly met some people. I was in Italy, and I randomly met some people on a train who said, "If you're interested in the arts," which I was and am, "the place you want to go is this place called Pietrasanta." We're just south of Carrara. Carrara is where the marble comes from, but Pietrasanta, especially then, was where the marble was carved. It's really where the sculptors work, and they come from all over the world to work in Pietrasanta. And so once again, by random chance, I put a note up in a pub down in the town. Pietrasanta has about 20,000 people. I put a note up on a board in English that said, "Looking for a house." Didn't have a phone. This was before people had cell phones. Said, "I'll be here tomorrow at 3 p.m." And
Mm.
I was, and a guy was waiting. He said, "I have a house up in a little village on the hillside called Caprilia. Let me show it to you." And so I actually spent a year, the year between my sophomore and junior years of college, living here before. I'd lived here before.
Uh-huh.
Um, and it is a stunningly beautiful place. And it is and it was and so we and it is filled with artists and writers
Mhm.
and poets and race car drivers, because the road up here is so exciting. The race car drivers like to practice on it. But so we thought, this is an easy place. So we came here because we thought, oh, it'll be easy. My husband has citizenship. I know this place. We rented a house sight unseen online at
Mhm.
Casa.it and came to the house, and it ended up being so much more than we imagined. It's actually surrounded by olive groves and forest and grape arbors, and it's, poppies bloom in the fields around us all over the place. So it's every movie that you've seen about Tuscany. It's all that stuff
Uh-huh.
is real, and we're living in it.
And, did you go to the pub the first day? I mean, how did you find it? You couldn't miss it? Is that
We couldn't miss it. So, like I said, there are 2 public places, the church and the pub. And at first we were actually a little intimidated. We could hear from our house is very close to the pub. We could hear from the house the sound of carousing. That's the only word for it. They were
Uh-huh.
carousing down there. And we were quite shy. And as a matter of fact, we sort of walked past it a couple of times and gave it the eye and felt too intimidated to go in.
Uh-huh.
But we sort of went in and we sat at a table, and people were nice. The wait staff was nice. We achieved, the prosecco that we were looking for. We got that,
Yeah.
and we did that probably 2 or 3 times a week for 4 months.
Mhm.
The 2 of us, we sat at a table, we talked to each other, we tried to smile and be polite. And finally, after 4 months, one of the regulars at the big table came over and said to us in Italian, "You look like very nice people. Why don't you come join our table?" And that was the beginning. So we went, we introduced ourselves, they introduced themselves, and now and that's and now that was 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago, and
Mhm.
now those people are our friends, and we dined with them last night. This Friday, one of them is turning 91 years old, and we're having a birthday party for him. We know everybody's kids, we know grandkids, we know these are our friends. It's now not only is
Yeah.
that our home, this is our family too.
I mean, it's so enticing. I don't know how one would, experience that in the States because you needed a place to meet,
Yes.
right?
And that I think is the thing, and that we were really looking for when we came to Italy. In many ways, we were looking for that sense of community, and we were looking for life that was a little bit slower paced than the sort of go, go,
Mhm.
go life that we were really living in the United States, where every day we had a to-do list of a million things, and you gotta get it done, and we gotta go here, and we gotta go there. And and to see our friends meant making arrangements, calling someone, setting something up, saying, well, when do we have time together? How about, how's September looking for you? Not so good. What about October? And that sort of thing, to see our friends was like that. And we wanted something a little different. So the fact that there was we were able to give the pub sort of the eyeball as we went past, because it's very open and public. There's a lovely, huge terrace out front with shade trees and people sitting at tables underneath
Mm.
them. So it isn't a secluded place that you feel like there are a lot of barriers to entry, other than our sort of
Mhm.
natural shyness. Our shyness was the only
Yeah.
barrier to entry there.
Yeah. That the thing that you're talking about time seems to me so important. This thing of having to have it book everything.
Right.
Um, and I know that Italy or, other cultures are known for having a different sense of time. But I was talking to a journalist in England, a young journalist, about third places. And one of the things I said is you don't have to schedule anything. You can
Right.
just turn up. And she
Yeah.
said, "Oh my God." She said her whole body relaxed. She felt physically different thinking about that idea, that she wouldn't have to text someone in advance or make an arrangement, that she could just go somewhere. And that idea, I suppose plenty of people haven't experienced it. I think that's really what I want you to tell us about, because I'm trying to convey to people it is possible to have these places and this experience,
Yes.
and it's not complicated. But
It's
it
not
has to it ha ha yeah.
It's not complicated, but I do wanna make one point about our pub, which is it's also intentional, and it's also government supported, and I think that that
Yeah.
is really important, that we make decisions, we make political decisions that really affect our communities, and like you said, she can feel her body relax. Not only does it affect our communities, it affects us as individuals. It affects our health, affects our physical health, our mental health, our emotional well-being. All of that is affected by having the ability to have these sorts of communities. So what I mean when I say that this place is government supported, it's these are all over Italy. It's an organization called Arci, ARCI, which is the Association of Recreation and Italian Culture. Is what it is. And they are nonprofits. They get tax breaks. They're supported by the government. You buy a membership that costs €10 a year, and it's good for every one of these. They're all over Italy. And so the people who run it don't have to worry about making a profit. So it's okay to sit. You can sit at a table all day, and order nothing. You don't have to order anything,
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
they don't see the people who are there as customers who
Mhm.
we need to turn over quickly so the next person can come in. And also, I have to say, workers in Italy are paid a living wage. And so you don't have service workers, baristas, and wait staff trying to get tips. So they're also not trying to
Mhm.
go over so they can get more tips. This is not a tipping culture. In the big
Mhm.
city where tourism happens, it's come to be expected, but Italian service workers are paid a living wage. Italians have free healthcare, free national healthcare. So that idea of, "Boy, you better hop or you're gonna be living in a box on a subway vent," isn't part of what goes on here. That's not
Mhm.
going on,
Mhm.
and so that leads those are political decisions, but they lead to a way of life where people do have time to sit under the trees and drink a nice cold glass of prosecco and chat with whoever is around about anything, nothing, whatever. Um, those sorts of things happen, but they don't happen by accident. That's
Yeah.
intentional, and it's valued here.
And you get meals there, right? You were telling me that there are
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's really so in a lot of the retired people tend to gather in the late afternoon there, catch up with each other. It's a really great community because I think that especially older people in the United States, the loneliness epidemic in the United States truly is scary. And it's especially difficult for older Americans. So this is a place where people can come, they sit, but of this sort of feeling of you should feel welcome, people should feel happy to hang out here. The co-owner chef of this restaurant, who is a genius, he likes to cook. He loves to cook. And so in the afternoons, people are sitting around, they're having maybe a glass of wine. He feels people should have a little something to eat. And by a little something to eat, we're talking a 3-course meal often. Um, we had the other night, we had some sliced prosciutto and salsicce, some salami, came out with some fresh baked bread that was so warm from the oven, came out. And we had that for a little while. And then after that, that went away. And then there was a lovely pasta in a cream sauce with some fresh tomatoes tossed in, just delicious. And then after that, that went away. And then after that, we had a whole lot of steamed mussels that were steamed in this sort of spicy broth. I don't know how it was made in this spicy broth that I will be
Mhm.
dreaming of this. All of that was free. Those were the free bar snacks. And it came with, plates and napkins and silverware and water and bread because people in the afternoon who are having a glass of wine uh, need a little something to eat, and the idea that you just get, some peanuts won't cut it in Italy, just
Mhm.
won't cut it here. So we often come back having had 1 glass of wine and being too full to have dinner. We're too full to have dinner.
Not
And that
like the States where apparently they're starting to charge for bread while bread
right,
bread on
it's
the
just like
table.
this is and I think another, important point to make here is that this is not something that Italians are unaware of or that happened by accident. This is a cultural value. It's a cultural value, values of generosity, values of hospitality. They certainly value good food. You don't have food this
Yes.
good without placing value on that, right? And you don't have community without placing value on that. And so
Right.
that's important, that this is not an accident that happened. This is a cultural value that people live and that people do things to make happen. They make this happen. They participate in the community very intentionally
Mhm.
because that's important.
And the people who are there are varied. I mean, they're the people who live nearby, right?
There's the people who live nearby, and we have ages from babies to, like I said, one of our friends is having his 91st birthday
Mhm.
on Friday, and we'll have a little celebration there. And we're all chipping in. This is a secret. Don't tell him. We're all chipping in. He can't really hike around in the woods anymore. He used to love to do that. So we've all chipped in to buy him one of those private helicopter flights that's going to fly him around all the places where he used to walk up. So we're all chipping in for that. So all ages, all socioeconomic statuses too. We've got, attorneys and doctors and accountants. We have gardeners and marble workers, stonemasons, we have artists, we have writers, we have men, we have women. There is a somewhat of a gender imbalance. I would say it's probably 2/3 men, 1/3 women. And that's left
Mhm.
over from traditional ways. We have people of all gender expressions. Actually, since it's such a tiny town, you would think, well, there are not going to be, very many trans people in this town. There is one trans woman that I know of. Welcome in the pub. Come on in, have a drink,
Mhm.
no
Mhm.
problem. And so it really is a huge mixture of people. So we see people really interacting. There is no status distinction. Um,
Mhm.
there are not people say, "Oh, I'd never sit with him. He's just a gardener." Me,
Mhm.
would never happen.
Yeah.
So,
And the conversations we were talking the other day, one of my concerns is that people have got so they don't want to bring up any controversial topic because they're
Right,
so afraid of because things have become so volatile. But that means people avoid even pretty basic stuff.
right.
And so you had some examples from your different the different places you've
Right. And I have to say the conversations in the pub sometimes can get quite heated because people feel passionately about things. And we've just had the European Union elections, and people had very
Yes.
strong
Yes.
ideas about the correct candidates who everyone should vote for. But I think the biggest uproar that we had was there was quite a to-do about whether a certain dish should have chopped parsley served on the top of it or not. And people were up in arms. There was shouting, there was banging tabletops. As a matter of fact, some people got up from the table, went back to the kitchen to continue arguing with the chef back there. And there was shouting from the kitchen about whether to have parsley on this pasta dish or not.
Well,
People felt very strongly. They expressed their
I I I can imagine there being differences of opinion and yeah, to put parsley on a dish that shouldn't
doesn't
have
get
it.
it. Yes, yes. It was
Yes.
solved
Yes.
instantly. In case you're wondering, that was solved
Yes.
by making a little
Yes.
more chopped parsley that was brought out to the table, and those who wished could put parsley on, those who didn't could leave it off. So
Uh-huh.
a consensus was reached, harmony was restored.
And it was a conversation. It wasn't everyone looking at their phones and saying, "Well,
Oh, no.
this guy says," and, "Well, my source says."
No, no. People have phones. They never look at them. Every now and then, someone pulls out a phone to show someone something, but people do not sit and scroll their phones, and because it would be considered actually quite rude to
Mhm.
sit and look at your phone. When that would just be considered not being a very good community member. And they
Mhm.
value being a good community member. You should be part of the community. That's an important thing to do. And it may mean that you don't get to look at your phone for a couple of hours, but the world will survive without that.
So when you look back at life in the States and
Mhm.
your experience when you were teaching,
Mhm.
what do you think you've learned then from being in Italy? What do you think back on? We talked about your dealing with your students, which
Right.
I thought was really important.
Right. That is one of the things that I think about a lot. I was a professor of sociology at Colorado College for 26 years. And for the past many years now, I would say decade, slowly it became more and more prevalent. But for the past decade, even before COVID, students would come to my office to talk to me during office hours about their papers or whatever. And they would sit down and I would say, "How's it going?" And the number one thing that came out of students' mouths over and over again was, "I am so lonely." And this is at a small residential college, but they felt so lonely. And I used to joke that I'm gonna stop having office hours, I'm gonna have office minute. I'm gonna have 1 minute every day, and anyone who's outside my door at that minute, I will see and chat with, but you had to be there at that minute because I thought waiting to see me, I was gonna put a jigsaw puzzle out there because I thought waiting to see
Mhm.
me, maybe they'll start talking to each other and cure some of this loneliness. We can't have, you know, 500 lonely people all being lonely alone. They could they could be lonely
Being
lonely
it's a
together.
it's a weird thing to think about, and yet it's a real phenomenon.
It's a real
And
phenomenon. Yeah. And I sort of thought, uh, from talking to my students and saying, "Well, why don't you there are other people, I know there are, who are also looking for friends. I know there are because one of them just left my office." And they said they had a problem, and I think this is something that's become increasingly problematic throughout all of American society, not just young people, is we've kind of forgotten how to hang out, how to just be somewhere
Mhm.
without an agenda, without a plan, how to just hang out. And I think that we have, as a society, really programmed our lives so much. I had forgotten how to hang out. I had to
Mhm.
relearn how to just sit without an agenda, just sit, drink a glass
And
of
see what
wine,
comes up.
and see what comes up with no agenda, with no timetable, and with no, "Oh, but we can only do this for 15 minutes because then I have another appointment." So to
Mhm.
say, and it's sort of funny because when my husband and I came here, we both retired, and so you gotta think about what your new life is gonna be like, and you gotta think about what it's gonna be like economically. So we sort of had this thing, we thought, "Well, we need to have a place we go, a social place, a coffee house or something." We thought, "There will be something, we will go there." And we actually put in our budget. We're gonna, how much money will we spend every week at this place? We budgeted that
Mhm.
amount. That turned out to be completely wrong-headed because we spend almost no money in the pub. The thing we spend there is time. And so
Mhm.
spending time, that was the thing, and so I think Americans have money skills, managing their money, but time skills, they haven't budgeted the time to make friends, make a community, hang out, see what happens, and lo and behold, we have an epidemic of loneliness that's really impacting
Mhm.
the quality of life in the United States.
Don't you think that Americans have somehow we've been told that relationships should be intentional rather than random, rather than that that everything it's all about
Sure.
matching interests, matching this, matching that,
Right.
instead of it happening and evolving. It
And
strikes me as really funny because people will say their best friends often are people that someone who was their roommate at college or someone they worked with. So quite random, that
and
and yet
and certainly we have found over the course of time here that having known, this it's really we're in a very small place, having known the same group of people for almost 2 years now, we discover layers to people all the time. We discover,
Mhm,
we thought, "Well, okay, that person's not to my taste necessarily. That's not gonna be my best friend." After you hang out with people a long enough time, other things come out, and it's like, actually, do have a connection that wasn't immediately apparent, and there is a
mhm,
match. It just didn't show
mhm.
up on a Tinder profile where you
Yes, yeah.
swipe right. That is so hard to say, where you would swipe and then hook up. These,
Yeah.
sitting over the course of time, you learn things about people, and we're all human beings. We all have these multiple layers of things, and people have all sorts of surprising interests, depths, ideas that, given time, come out. And so, how am I supposed to know whether I need to intentionally be friends with someone or not until I have known them a while? Then I can decide,
Yeah.
this is a match somehow for me.
And it's not just talking, but it's listening, isn't it?
Oh,
And
absolutely.
watching
Right.
that you learn.
Right.
You don't just dive in. And you
Right.
can walk your pub.
Oh, yes. My pub is 100 yards from here, 200 yards. Yeah.
Almost crawl
Yes.
if
Yes.
necessary.
Absolutely. I can walk the entire village in 20 minutes.
Uh,
Yes, I live at one extreme end of it, and the other extreme end is a 10-minute walk. So,
I see.
it's a
So
small
that's
pla yeah. And so not every place is like this, obviously. This seems very magical. But the things that make this place like this also are not just a function of it being so small. It's not just a function of it being in Italy. It's a function of decisions people have made, everything from the small personal decision, I'm gonna clear, 4 hours in my calendar to do nothing, up to, big, community decisions. We're all in this together. Let's support each other. Let's do things to build this community, up to the national level where there are political decisions that are made to give tax breaks to organizations that help foster this kind of community, recognizing that that is for the good of the nation that these places exist.
mhm.
And so that's not just small towns in Italy, that's places can have that.
It
That's a
could be
possibility.
anywhere.
It could be.
Well, I've been reading just this morning because talking to you about the support that these places have made me wonder if there's anything comparable in the United States. And what there is something called senior centers, and there's
Right.
actually federal legislation that provides money for senior centers. Now, where I live in a small, not as small, but 6,600 people, there is a senior center and there's subsidized lunches and
Right.
activities and things. But it is a closed building. You have outside of town. People have to drive there. There's no mixing. They say, "Oh, it's a community center and everyone's welcome," but no one else would go there, and no one can walk there.
Right.
So
Right. You're not going to find the
it's
teenagers
not
hanging out there. Yeah.
it's not at all the same, and yet they exist, and there's an acknowledgement on a federal level that seniors need old people need such places for, all kinds
Right.
of support, and I'm now think that there's a perfectly good argument for doing something similar, but that would be for everyone, and that would be better for the older people. Older people do not like being segregated. It's no
Right.
that's not fun. They wanna be around, the other people of different ages. They like to be around children, and that when we talk about the lonely epidemic with kids, I mean, part of the problem is kids don't have anywhere to go.
Right. Absolutely. And so you think we have these places and we set them up sort of as institutions, whereas here it seems much more organic. You can just go in because you want an ice cream and get an ice
Right.
and leave. You can do that, or you can go and stay all day. And so that means that, the teenagers, they're used to being in, they just come in, they do things. We were actually there last night for dinner, and a teenager came in and passed by our table. We were sitting with a whole bunch of people and said, "Oh, that thing you're eating, that looks so good. Can I have some of that?" Sure. Sure you can. Absolutely. So first she pulled up a chair,
Yeah.
and that, you know, Th so there are things other than I think one of the things with lots of centers for teens is they're kinda lame. They're lame,
Yeah.
They're lame.
Yeah,
And
the youth club,
the
that
youth club, right? We're gonna learn to square dance now. Oh, yay. But places that are sort of they're more organic, and we do see some of that in the United States with some places like coffee shops. We see that they are increasingly being run out of business
Mhm.
because, they need to have that turnover. They need to have that volume. And also, we're going more and more into a drive up business. Why go in and sit down someplace if you can drive through the drive-through window and get it in your car and not have to interact with anybody? So we see an increasing loss of place. The United States used to have these places,
Yes.
barbershops, beauty parlors, parks, coffee houses, taverns. They used to be there, right?
And
Yeah,
now I hear about teenagers who have to go and hang out at Target because there's nowhere else that's free
that's
that they
free. Right,
or
right.
and it doesn't things don't have to be free, I realize. They have to be cheap enough. They have to be
So
affordable. It's like the
right,
place you go, you don't spend very much, but
right.
it's not free all the time. You can
No, it's very, very low cost, and once again, that is government
yes.
supported. So to go
Yeah.
for lunch and have a meal, you can have a two-course meal for €15, so about, $17, or a one-course meal for, €10, so about $12. But that one course is you get bread, you get a glass of wine, you get coffee afterwards, and you have this huge plate of pasta with an incredible sauce on it. You get some vegetables on the side of that. The two-course meal then comes with a second course. There's protein with that, so you'll get
Mhm.
some lovely, delicious. I mean, this people come from miles around to eat this food, so not some sort of slop, but gourmet food, some
Yeah.
sort of delicious fish or chicken or roast or something, and you get all of that, and it takes you 2 hours to eat it. but as it should, because you appreciate it and the bread is there, and then you have a little dessert afterwards and a coffee. And so that's pretty good eating for 15 euros.
Yeah.
To have that.
Yeah. And that's part of the point of that because this is so people can get a good meal
Right.
affordably.
So imagine if the coffee houses in the United States, imagine, first of all, if the people work there made a living wage, so they weren't dependent on tips,
Mhm.
need to get you out of there so they get the next tip.
Mhm.
Imagine if the coffee cost, $1 instead of $7.
Mhm.
Imagine if they had, as our pub does, all the daily newspapers are there, so you can read the newspaper, which I
Yeah.
know seems very archaic, but it prevents people. We do have internet, but it prevents people from looking at the news online to
Mhm.
be able to
Mhm.
open the paper, which means that instead of staring at your phone, you're staring at the paper, which means someone else can also be looking at it, which means the two of you can start to talk about that.
Mhm.
So, imagine
Yeah.
that could happen in the United States, but that would be, if that requires people, and at our pub also all sorts of other things happen. I took a CPR class there a couple of months
Mhm.
ago. I went to a talk about how to identify wild herbs a couple of months ago. Sometimes there's music there, sometimes there's not. There are raffles held for various charities, and we all go in and
Mhm.
buy our raffle tickets and do things. I was at a fundraiser for a cancer society there recently, a big dinner, and we all chipped in. And so those sorts of things happen there too. I don't think that it's impossible for that to happen in the United States, but as in Italy, it has to be intentional.
Yes, it has to be thought through and designed to work. And the point of this, just to be clear, is not to suggest that everybody should move to Italy, God knows, but that we can learn from that that there's no reason that some of these things can't be implemented
Right. And the Italians
here
have a
if we
Oh,
choose
go ahead.
to.
Yeah, the Italians have a
If we
saying,
choose.
"La dolce far niente," the sweetness of doing nothing, which is a cultural value. If we could choose that, the sweetness of doing nothing, rather than that we have to be productive constantly all the time and running around, and we take pride in that. We take pride in being super busy, despite how damaging it is for us in so many ways.
And we talk a lot about community in the States, but do we really value it?
Right. Right.
It's as you say, it's about what you value,
Yeah.
and I hope that this will stimulate people to think a little harder about what that what we all really deep down value.
Right. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Really fun to talk. I plan to continue to pester you about certain places until I can actually get there to visit, but
It's
it's
a
really
lovely
great to be
place.
able to record it.
A lovely place, and you are always welcome here.
Thank you. Thanks very much. I'll talk to you soon, Kathy. Take
All
care.
right. Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thank you for joining me at The Way We Live Now, a podcast where we roam the world for ideas and inspiration and talk about tools that will help to make the world a better place. I'd really love to have your ideas and comments. Please leave a comment below and subscribe to the feed. You can sign up for my newsletter, which I try to make a real letter, at karenchristensen.substack.com.